The weird thing about Dunkirk as well, and this does happen with good movies occasionally, is that I read good reviews of them, like really well written reviews, not necessarily positive, and then I don't want to do a review myself because I'm sort of like, all these big names like Mark Commode and stuff have gone and done their take on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can I really step on their toes?
Oh, no, I really enjoyed the film. I thought that it was really well done. It was a really nice balance between actually these kind of personal stories and the overall picture of what was going on, and contextualised it quite well, and kind of conveyed that theme of this not really being a victory, more of just we're still in the game.
It's sort of like probably one of the worst military defeats in the Second World War from the UK side of it. From the Allies side.
It's probably one of the worst
in general
military
ever.
defeats.
Yeah. And it's sort of fascinating. Like Christopher Nolan did a series at the BFI of selections of films that were about his inspiration for Dunkirk, and he showed like disaster movies. He showed Speed as well, and he showed silent films a lot, and all that comes across.
Yeah.
There's very little talking in the film, which I guess when I came out of Dunkirk, I was overpowered by the feeling that that is what film is supposed to be, that film. Whether or not there were problems with it, yes, I think so. But, you know, without almost any dialogue and in these massive kind of like cinematic spaces that he creates over the course of the film, that's how he tells his story. And that's how I see film being. That's what it should be.
And I think the lack of dialogue is kind of quite accurate to kind of a lot of people when they go through military training as well. Things remain fairly calm in terms of the amount being spoken and said. There's not that panicked atmosphere, because that's what you're trained to do and believe. And communication is just very efficient and straightforward between people. And there's not any nuance to the line between the different characters, and everyone is just focused on surviving, I think, and they only speak when surviving will help them.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple of lines in the film are him trying to avoid being shot, both by the French and by the Germans.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't speak almost for 15 minutes, and it just follows him trying to take a shit at the start of the film. I mean, that's kind of powerful. It's like they're just very basic human interactions trying to take place, trying to stay alive in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then that sort of plays into some people's problems with the film, because a lot of what I've seen in terms of critical reaction, there's been two major critiques of the film as far as I've seen it. One of them is that the film has left people cold. So I had a friend, Rowan Ellis, who was like, she said to me that Dunkirk kind of left her cold because it's short on characters. Like fundamentally, there are no depth to the characters. And I'm inclined to agree with that in some ways. I think that's correct. Yeah. So that's why I think it's interesting that he compared the film mostly to natural disaster movies. Because I thought he was much more saying, like, this is about faceless people, just like humans, dealing with this vast failure of humanity. Yeah. Right? And that, to me, was an all right reading of it. It didn't leave me cold. By quite the opposite. I think I was really stressed throughout the film. It had a very physical reaction in me. Yeah. And I'm looking around the IMAX. One of the best things about the IMAX in London is that there's a big curved ranking of seats, so you can really see across the cinema. And it's nice sometimes in a movie to watch the audience's reaction to make sure it's not just you experiencing it. And there's all these people nervously picking their faces, chewing their nails.
Biting their nails,
Yeah, and I at one point went... at one point, you know. I went with my mum's partner, and he was like grab the sides of the seat.
It's definitely a stressful film to watch, I think, isn't it? It's kind of, some of it is... Ooh,
thanks.
Updated report. Great. Some of it is more around the actual situation rather than around stress for caring about specific characters, I think. I think it's more the stress at what seemingly is indiscriminate killing. Yeah. And the amount of death that is happening.
And so I think...
rather than it being you particularly caring for certain characters. I think you certainly care for some characters more than just the kind of B-list people that are in the back of the shot. But there isn't that strong connection you feel. But I feel like that was done on purpose.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things we've had this summer is we've had at least 3 films now that are big budget, American produced films that take a very negative look at war. And Wonder Woman and War for the Planet of the Apes did a similar thing with war, where they basically refused to have singular heroic narratives in the film. So Wonder Woman saves like a whole village of people, spoilers, but then she gets, they all get gassed in the next scene and she can't do anything about it. War for the Planet of the Apes, you haven't seen it, but it does a similar thing where there is a heroic narrative, but it's sort of separate to what actually ends up happening. Dunkirk, it completely refuses a heroic narrative Three or four people do heroic things at certain points, but often they do unheroic things at other points as well.
Yes.
And then also, in the face of that war, it's meaningless, ultimately.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there aren't heroes of the film. There are moments of heroism in the film. And it does a really great job of portraying those little moments which ultimately add up to what was seen as kind of the victory from defeat.
So if I was going to pick a moment from it, like there's a bit in this near the start of the movie where two guys carry another injured man on a stretcher, and they spend, this is the main two characters at the start of the film, and they spend about 10 minutes rushing this guy to the last boat that's going to leave.
But you quite quickly realise why they're doing it.
Yeah, they're trying to save him, right?
But no, they're trying to
get on the boat.
They're trying to get on the boat. They quickly realise that all the medics who are evacuating people onto the boat are getting to travel back across the channel.
They do the right thing,
right?
They do the right thing trying to save the guy, and then immediately that boat sinks. So basically, nothing good that someone does in the film really pays off without difficulty.
I don't think they were doing it for the guy at all. No, they just found this dead body on the stretcher, or this guy's body on the stretcher,
because it felt like a more realistic look at what that experience was like for the people who were in it. They weren't like, they were brave in what they were doing, but like in the face of that, fuck it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to talk about that I don't think I've seen quite enough of in reviews is the structure of the film, which is really fascinating. Because one problem with Dunkirk is that, it was 2 weeks essentially of just like endless death on the beach, and then an ending that was very quick. So it was sort of difficult to make a film out of. The climax isn't a big battle; it's the fact that they all managed to get out, or some of them.
Yeah.
So what they end up doing in the film is creating 3 different timelines essentially that run concurrently to each other, but at different speeds.
Yeah. And very different starting points as well.
Yeah, so one takes place over about a week, I think it is, maybe 2. One takes place about over a day, and one takes place over an hour. And what that means is that they can pick one moment that crosses across all these timelines and make that the climax.
Yeah,
even though it's not actually the climax of Dunkirk, it's the climax of these people's experience of Dunkirk.
Yeah, and it's quite rewarding to watch because you kind of feel like you now have what are these small little stories, and it fits in very well with then showing it, pulling out and being like, this is the bigger picture of what's happening here. Yeah. And that message kind of hits you at exactly that point in time, which is...
I think it's fair to say that the craft of the film is almost completely faultless.
Yeah.
Watching it, I was, as a filmmaker, I was amazed by some of the technical stuff they'd done. Like having an IMAX camera in the cockpit of a Spitfire. Yeah. They're huge. I don't know how they did that. It must have been like a custom build or like dragged on a plane. Some of the stunts are astonishing.
Yeah, the plane stunts.
Those people in the background on the beach, most of them are cardboard cutouts. And the fact that you don't notice that is like a sign of really solid craft, right? Hoyte van Hoytema, beautiful cinematography from him, like stunning work, shows that Interstellar wasn't just like a kind of goof between the two of them. It's really, they are an amazing collaboration, I think, as director and DP. But let's talk about the other major critique that people had of the film.
What, the accusation of whitewashing?
Yeah,
or?
I don't think it actually was that major critique. I've actually only seen I saw one article that had it as its headline, but sort of as a joke, and then I saw one article that genuinely spoke about it at length in not an unreasonable way as well, I think.
So basically, here for those of you that don't know, the critique of it is that nearly all the characters in the film, and certainly all the main characters, are white, and there was also the involvement of people of lots of other ethnicities within the battle for Dunkirk as well. The film does show some of the kind of French African core, and obviously those are kind of people of lots of different ethnicities. But the main criticism, I think, was a lot of the kind of Indian and Punjabi soldiers.
Of which I think there are about 30,000 or something like that at that particular conflict.
I think there are 3,000.
Oh, shit, I added a 0.
1 to 3,000.
Yeah.
There aren't very many. It's less than 1% of the soldiers.
So that's the thing. It's sort of like, reading about it,
And they were mainly logistics, those soldiers. So they would help ferry the British soldiers around, and also would provide them with ammunition, because the British Expeditionary Force was one of the first motorised armies at that point, which was quite cutting edge for the time.
I think that when I hear criticisms like that, I find it easy to understand why those criticisms are there. I think that there's a whole group of people whose history has been ignored on film, and especially when it comes to the First World War and the Second World War. There's a lot of really quite covered battles that actually had loads of people of colour working in them. And to not show those stories is a shame, and it's important that they do that. And I think the other thing that's thrown it into focus is the fact that Wonder Woman did actually show some of those people. So it sort of gave an option about how that could have been done in a blockbuster scenario. Yeah. That said, I don't I've always said, like, I don't think that you can hate a film just because it doesn't do what you wanted it to do. Just because it isn't the story that you wanted to tell doesn't mean it's then a bad film in and of itself. And I think actually I first came up with this rule when you didn't like Dark Knight Rises. Because you felt the ending of Dark Knight Rises wasn't dark enough. And I was like, cool, that's fine. That's only your opinion. We have to talk about the film that they ended up making, as opposed to like these imaginary films that we.
I think that was one of my criticisms of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of problems with that.
It's really silly at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
That film.
But so with Dunkirk, I mean, the fact that there were lots of people of colour there, but they were about 1% of the people who were there. And bear in mind, we only have 4 main characters in the film, essentially.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want to widen it out to like everyone who's in those stories, 8. It would be almost misrepresentative to be like, let's make sure we get a person of colour in there. The thing is that like I get it, and I feel like it's an important thing to talk about, but it's not a reason for me to throw this film out. It's beautiful and it's well made, and I don't think that's enough for me to say we shouldn't.
But it would have been. It maybe would have done something to quieten that criticism if there had been shots showing like the actual people risking their lives with the kind of logistics and providing ammunition. There could have been some sort of acceptance of this. I think a lot of the criticism comes from the propaganda from the British following Dunkirk, which was like, we are now alone, we are the kind of scrappy upstart.
Yeah.
It is just Britain against the entirety of these German Nazi forces, which is inaccurate because it was also all the people from everywhere in the British Empire that were also fighting and dying in that fight. And the British propaganda kind of left them out. It was like, it's us against this big German monster.
I think if anyone gets really shortchanged in it, it's actually the French, because they're sort of left out of the film almost in its entirety when they were doing the vast majority of the work while everyone was on the beach, essentially keeping the Germans out of Dunkirk beach. Does that make any sense? That isn't given anywhere near enough screen time.
No, I think
which is a shame.
That kind of brings on to one of my kind of slight criticisms of the film, is that there isn't really that sense of the impending doom that is closing in on them. I don't
speak for yourself.
I don't
I was
feel
horrified
there was
the
enough.
whole time.
Or there isn't that sense of there's this net which is tightening.
Yeah,
I don't feel like there's that rush to kind of get off the beach, and it's more there's a desperation that the Germans are killing everyone, but it's not that they're getting closer each day.
I suppose
you only kind of get that when there's a scene in the boats where they come very very close.
I suppose part of that, for me, is one of the things I like about Dunkirk is that it's a war film that's very much from on the ground, as opposed to like people in dark rooms pushing sliders around big maps, right? So I feel like if you're looking at that big map view, you definitely get that sense of it closing in. And the opening shot is him getting that flyer, that German propaganda that's like, you're all going to die, you're all closed in.
Yeah.
But you can't really get that from on the ground. I think for them, their aim is just simply to get off that beach as quickly as possible. So yeah, I think the film's biggest strength, and maybe one of its more pressing problems, is its minimalism, in the sense that it doesn't explain a lot.
Yeah.
And in the end, it can make you feel adrift. We have a comment, actually, from someone about that. Movie Buff says, the only thing that I didn't get in Dunkirk was the French guy at the beginning when he got on the boat. Was he a reason for the boat sinking and later escaping? No. The French guy who gets on the boat and then stays outside is...
So he's found a British soldier's dead body and put on the British soldier's uniform to pretend to be a British soldier so that he can get on a boat and escape Dunkirk.
And so he gets on this boat and he's waiting outside because he doesn't want to be below decks. He doesn't want to be below decks when if the boat sinks, which it then does. So he lets them out. That's the major plot point. That boat isn't the same boat as the one that Cillian Murphy ends up on later on.
No.
Which I think is a plot point that some people have gotten confused.
Yeah, no, that boat is a much bigger boat.
But also, when they get off this boat and they swim back, Cillian Murphy pulls them on the life raft. So it's obviously a different time point.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Which I think can throw people. I mean, one of the interesting things about that overlapping time thing, so right when you see Cillian Murphy on that boat, I suddenly realised that at any point when they got on a boat that looked like it was safe, it wouldn't be safe.
It wouldn't be safe, yeah.
So I was like, okay, that puts me on edge, and that's kind of a clever way of raising stakes by moving beyond the normal time confines of a blockbuster. But it's weird as well to criticise a film like this so much when it's like it does almost everything completely correct. Like I think that I find it really hard to think of major problems with the film that aren't very small. So if you think about a movie like...
no, there's not anything you can be like, this is a massive problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There are small criticisms, which...
It's almost why I like having like a whole article about how, is Dunkirk whitewashing? Because at the end of the day, like if everyone's going to praise a film massively, it is good of people to bring in that discerning.
Of course, yeah.
chat,
But I mean,
like
it brings in that opportunity to kind of have and people to be able to recognise and think, well, wouldn't actually the story of someone from an ethnic minority background that is drafted into the kind of the British Expeditionary Force or the British Army, and there must be millions of stories there, thousands of stories there that are untold and would make great films as well.
Yeah.
And having that as the start, I think it brings that discussion to the forefront and kind of promotes the idea of people doing that.
Good review of Dunkirk, Aaron. Cool.